That's what we both have.
And Paul, I don't know if Art told you, but you actually will probably start before 6 o'clock because our 5:45 slotted, unfortunately.
Let's get through next week.
We're not going to do that.
Because I was
Paul's
with
going
our
to be
big
doing
project, we got
the
people
ARPA
coming
fund
in,
at
I don't know,
5:30.
how many there are.
I mean, now that we don't have the 5:45, but let's just slide it to 6
technology.
20 minutes.
But like,
Board
it has no windows.
But I'll bet you we got you started before 6.
But I get more than I have to move it.
You haven't heard the dialogue yet, it'll be after 6.
Did I say that out loud? Actually, so I always start and say, welcome to the workshop. We have 3 topics tonight. Let's hand the baton for topic 1. That's my monologue workshop.
He is true. John, he's not lying.
It's in between. Some of your folks in the market.
Thank you, Art. Thank
So
you.
you're just going to help us do one.
Thank you.
Drawn for a new base.
Look at Johnny Carson out there, he usually gets to fill the dead
You're
air.
right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we are close, right?
Close enough.
It is 5:27.
27, yeah, we have 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Out of time.
Rumble, and rumble.
I'll share the highlights of our day.
Silence.
I got to do submittals for my new project today, that was
Okay,
fun.
here we go. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Thanks for kicking it off.
Yeah, and I really don't like submittals, you're familiar with submittals, right?
Yeah, I don't do them. We hand them off to the engineers because they're the professionals.
Yes, it's not fun.
I know when to call in the picture out of their folder.
Yeah.
What calls here?
Really, I like.
Right, assuming Patty, that we just.
Highlight, was
I made sushi for the gas station sushi.
my YWCA project, I helped the superintendent put up the header for the double doors. He was struggling with it, I just happened to pop in, because our aspect
What I
we lent a helping hand.
There you go.
Yes.
Valid. Highlight of the day.
Statement a little bit to the west.
That's the highlight of the day.
Because tomorrow we don't have work,
Thanks for asking.
It's Friday.
but I'll be
So
finishing up.
Art
on-
uses it now. So 1/4 of the space, well, 1/5 of our legal space, the non-base space, was designed for a community room. And my goal was to have a meeting every week.
Nice.
Well, the communities throughout the town of Webster uses it quite regularly. We've set it up this week, right, Art? We were just talking about the community room.
That's
It's working beautifully.
It was. I thought it was.
No, I was just looking.
Okay. Well, Karen, we are, I think, pretty ready, huh? Screen. Well, welcome everybody to the Thursday, April 14th, 2022 Webster Town Board Workshop. Tonight we had originally had 3 agenda items, but our middle one, Chief Dennis Kohlmeyer from the Webster Police Department was unable to attend, so we have 2 presentations tonight. Our first one is by Paul Adams, our Director of Finance, and the ARPA fund options. Paul, I'll hand it on to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Good evening, everyone. About 9 months ago, the town was fortunate enough to receive ARPA funds. Back in June, just to give you a little timeline, I submitted a budget request to the New York State Division of Budget. We received confirmation shortly after, and in July 2021, we got our first check, which was a little bit over $2 million. This represents about 50% of the funding. The remainder will come probably by the end of July this year, and that should be about $2,033,000. The funds have been recorded in the general part-time fund as deferred revenue. They'll just sit there until we start to utilize the money. At the time that we utilize it, it will be recognized as revenue. Just recently, in January, the U.S. Treasury came up with the final rule. It became effective just a few days ago on April 1st. It basically sets forth the rules for eligible use of funds. Prior to this, there was an interim rule, which has been tweaked a bit, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So basically, those are our guidelines, and the town is considered a non-entitlement unit, so the funding flows from New York State rather than directly from the Treasury. And non-entitlement units are cities and towns with populations of 50,000 or less. Use of the funds. Some of the following are some of the primary ways that the funding can be utilized. It can be used to respond to public health emergencies, to combat the economic impact from COVID-19. You can fund the town's revenue loss. You can offer premium pay for essential workers, or it can be used for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So we've had some preliminary meetings, and we came up with some proposed use of funds. The first idea was to allocate $350,000 for economic impact of COVID-19. So the town may offer grants to nonprofit organizations that have sustained severe economic impact on the pandemic in response to a health emergency. These recipients would be accounted for as sub-recipients. There is an annual reporting requirement that the town has to comply with. So anyone receiving a grant of $50,000 or more would be considered a sub-recipient and would be required to comply with certain reporting requirements, document how the money was spent, etc. The eligible organizations will have experienced negative economic and disproportionate impacts. Some examples of that may be decreased revenue, financial insecurity, an effect on their capacity to weather financial hardship, challenges covering payroll, mortgage costs, operating costs, etc. Now, most of the expenditures that are eligible for reimbursement are from the period March 3rd, 2021 to the current date and beyond. But for economic impact, they actually allow you to go back in time a bit, so you can actually go back prior to March 3rd of 21. So the town is proposing to award grant funds to eligible participants, applicants. We're proposing that the grant applications will be due by the end of May. During June, we'll appoint a town subcommittee which will review the applications and make recommendations to the town board. And tentatively, we'd like to have those awarded at the July 7th board meeting. The second proposed use of funds is to replace lost public sector revenue, lost revenue that the town endured through the period of the pandemic. The final rule actually offered a change in this area. They actually added significant flexibility for the use of these funds. They've streamlined it so that the town now may elect a standard allowance of up to $10 million to spend on government services. So this proposing to take roughly $1.2 million of the funds and designate it as a standard allowance, which would be spent on many different things, and it'd be very, as I said, this streamlines it, so there would be less degree of reporting for this category. So government services include any service traditionally provided by the town. And common examples are like road building, maintenance, infrastructure, health services, general admin, staff and administrative facilities, environmental remediation, and police safety services. based on some of our preliminary meetings, we came up with some ideas. We said, how can the town best utilize this portion of the revenue? We kicked around ideas such as modernize the information technology, hardware, software, and cybersecurity. Some could be devoted to highway infrastructure, police technical equipment and vehicles. Could designate some for the town comprehensive plan, or it could actually be used for the Westchester and Hamlet environmental remediation. The third category is water and sewer infrastructure. We're proposing to designate $2.5 million. This category will be designed to address the tremendous need to handle deferred maintenance issues regarding drinking water systems, treatment of sewage and stormwater. In our case, would be wastewater treatment. So it applies to the construction of publicly owned treatment waters. And as you know, we're in the preliminary stages of beginning the wastewater treatment plant phase 2 project. It's a $31 million project, and these funds can actually be applied toward that. We're also applying for a WIA grant, which requires a 75% match. I was concerned that that might be an issue, but found out in the past couple of days that it's not. You can actually use the ARPA money to contribute toward your match. So that won't be an issue. I just also added a note here that the town's pump stations would also qualify. So I know we've talked about some other projects that could be rather significant. So the money could go either way, really. So in summary, there's $4,050,000, which we'll have by the end of July. As I said, $350,000 for grants, $1,082,000 for revenue loss, government services, and $2.5 million for wastewater treatment plant project. The timetable for the use of the funds, as I said, the eligible expenses must be incurred between March 3rd, 21 and December 31st of 2024, with that one exception for the one for the economic impact. So as long as the funds are obligated, as long as you have a project which has been firmly established and approved, basically obligated, you can have up to 2 additional years through the end of 2026 to actually spend these funds within the performance period. The reporting requirements, we have a deadline coming up in about 2 weeks. The town must file an expenditure report for the period March 3rd, 21 through March 31st of 22. This will be somewhat easy for us because we have not spent any of the money yet. But one thing we will have to do is designate that portion of revenue loss that we want to apply to the standard allowance. So if our final decision is to go with that $1,002,000, designate as standard loss, standard deduction, then we have to include that in the report. So then subsequent reports will be due April 30th of each year. The annual expenditures greater than $750,000 will also be subject to a single audit, which is a special audit, which not only financial, but it includes some compliance aspects to it, which is required by the federal government for certain federal funding. That's the summary. I'm sure you might have some questions, and hopefully we'll have some answers.
Paul, I have one question. You mentioned that the economic impact costs could have been incurred prior to 3/3/21. How far back can that go?
I think it goes back to the start of 2020.
So beginning of the pandemic.
Right, basically.
So we've had these funds for coming up on a year, correct? We've had these funds since, what, July 2021, I believe? Is that- Can you hear me or not?
The next check?
Pardon?
Or you're saying when is the next?
No, we've had the 2
Oh, yeah,
million
we've had
for,
funds
since
since,
July, right?
for about 9 months.
Right.
Yeah. Half of the funds.
Okay. So I'm just, I mean, there are nonprofits out there that are definitely in need of funds sooner than later. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how this subcommittee is going to work. Because in the spirit of getting these funds out as soon as possible, it just seems that, I understand it's a process, but how do we expedite that? How is this process going to work? Who are the members going to be? Are they going to decide, put a metrics together to see who qualifies? I just would like to get these funds out sooner than later.
Well, I know that we're going to develop an application, which will have to be pretty detailed, and we'll have to spell out the various requirements so that I can comply with the reporting requirements. As far as who's on the committee, it was mentioned that I would be on the committee. I'm not sure of the other members.
Okay.
I think would be probably 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, because, and John, I'll put it this way, because Deputy Supervisor Cataldi and myself and Paul have met 2 or 3 times on this. Or, is it 3? In the last couple months, because that led up to what Paul just presented. And what Paul just presented, and I can't stress this enough, and you can go back in this PowerPoint, proposed. During our conversations, we are, Patty and Paul and I said, this is $4.1 million, all right? Now, I've been consistent on this, I've written articles about it. I feel like the town won the lottery, and anybody who won the lottery, they all of a sudden have a lot of friends and relatives. And everybody's knocking on my door, and everybody's calling me, and everybody wants the money sooner than later. And in my articles I've written about this, it said that the town, and I think it's because of good past leadership and current leadership in budgeting processes, really did not suffer financially like other municipalities have. And that's a combination of our fund balance policy. It's a combination of years of conservative budgeting, both for expenses and revenues, that was occurring in this town long before I became a supervisor. So it put us as a town and a governing board in a good position to not knee-jerk. And I've been very adamant about that. I've written it, I've said it. We will look at these funds and make sure that they're parsed out in what is the best way for the Webster community. And everybody's got a story of hardship. Everybody has suffered hardship in one way or another from COVID. What I found interesting about these meetings is that I never envisioned, really, as Paul was educating Patty and I on the 60-plus pages at first of the U.S. Treasury Department's guidance on what we could use it for. I just always thought, well, it's going to be something that relates to the town of Webster government. That what do we do as a government? And Paul educated on the fact that, well, we could open this up for grants to Webster-related organizations that are 501c3s. And that was interesting. That was a very interesting thing. And Patty, I know that Paul, you and I talked about it, and we decided that that was a good idea. Now, whether the town board says that's a terrible idea, I think all $4.1 million should be totally isolated down to government-related town things. Then we will scrap $350,000 of grant money, and we won't have to come up with the application process and the advisory board for that, and the what requirements there are, because there's subjectivity there. I can tell you this, we'll take a lot of the subjectivity out of it, because every agency is going to come to us, and I can think of 10 off the top of my head. Some of them have already come to me. And their lips are going to flap and say, we need the money. Everybody needs the money. Well, when you apply for a grant, you're going to show me your financial statements. You're going to show us your financial statements. So we have some tangible objectivity to make a relative decision about the applicants that you've got. Who is most meritorious of getting this money? So, I know that's a long-winded answer, but everybody wants the money yesterday. I was at first very against opening this up to the outside, to 501c3s that are not the town Webster government related things. We have enough other things that we need to use that money on here. The department heads have lined up at my door with all the things that they need. And there's plenty of things we need that fall outside of the annual budget. But we're also trying to, be fair, which is such a subjective term, to the fact that, how did I start this monologue? We did not suffer because of good leadership over the years, long before I was here. So if there are entities, agencies that service Webster citizens, but they're not the town government, that we could help out with this money, and the U.S. Treasury says that we can, Patty, Paul, and I decided, let's do that. And we put out a framework of a proposal. Should it be $350,000? Should it be $200,000? Should it be $1 million? We said $350,000. And then we know the other two numbers that are $1.2 million and $2.5 million. The one thing I will tell you about those other two numbers that add up to about $3.7 million, those unequivocally, irrefutably, are town of Webster government items. And this board may decide, and I would respect what this board decides, that they may want to basically scuttle the concept of having a grant portion of this, because it will be, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, if we stick with those numbers, your department and some of the other departments in town government will spend time and resources on maybe more on the $350,000 because of what you said, the $50,000 being, what do you call it, sub-recipient and reporting requirements. So even after we vet who gets the money, we will be married to that agency for months, if not years, as we get reporting on that. That's a reality. Is that correct?
It will be time consuming, that small piece of it.
Okay.
And I have absolutely no problem with opening it up to 501c3s, and quite frankly, I think that's the right thing to do. If anything, I would, because we are opening up to all 501c3s in the town, I would like to see that number increase from 350,000 to 500,000. That's my opinion. Okay, so this is our first time we're having a discussion as a board regarding this, and I'd also like to see more money go into the water and sewer infrastructure. Obviously, we're going to have a presentation this evening. Okay, because a lot of our infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, has been in need of upgrades for years, and really haven't had those upgrades. And now we have an opportunity to allocate monies towards that. And I just think I'd like to see those funds increased.
John, can I ask you this, and I know you're seeing this for the first time, well, you got the packet yesterday, but this is the first time. One number goes up, one number goes down. So the 150 increase to the grants means that the general services of $1.2 million, I'm going to say, is going to come down by 150.
Right.
Now you want more for sewer, so now we're at $1.05 million.
Yeah.
For replacing lost public revenue. How much more than the $2.5 million propose in this for water and sewer do you envision more? How much more than 2.5 million?
I'd like to see at least $500,000.
So you want that to 3 million?
Yep.
And that would mean that on April 30th, when you report, which will be easy reporting on what we've expended to date, 0.
Yeah.
But when you tell the reporting agency about what are we saying for the replacing lost public sector revenue, based on Councilman Cahill's proposal, we would be at about 650. Is that right? 550. 550 for things such as the modernization of the IT, hardware and software of the town government, highway infrastructure that you put as an example. I take it that's not our roads per se, that's more our highway garage and things. Is that correct?
It can be used for roads,
Okay.
roads, bridges.
The town comprehensive plan, which I know we have a presentation, I think, slotted for May 12th on that. The Webster Hamlet environmental remediation. Last we saw that cost, well, it's not the remediation.
No, I wanted to
It's
say
like,
it's
holy
the
cow,
testing.
it's the
It's
testing.
Right.
But, you know, if you move the money up, one thing that is not moving is the 4.1 million total.
Right.
So in Councilman Cahill's proposal, the 2 movings up creates 550 left for replacing lost public sector revenue and the categories that fall into that.
Which I don't really feel is enough. I don't think that's enough to be meaningful on the projects that you just mentioned and things that we have coming up. I want to comment that while there may be many not-for-profits in the community who are listening and think, okay, let's make an application, we have to remember that in that grant application, there are very strict requirements according to the government on what that money can be used to be reimbursed for. So although there may be 10 to 15, they may not all qualify. That's something we have to look at carefully.
And the flip side is there may be 25 or 30, and they may all qualify. So that's why, you know, my thoughts are to increase that bucket of money for that.
I understand your request for that and your concern with it. I think that taking that much out of the 1.25 of what we put aside for governmental services, and while the 150 to the not-for-profit grant doesn't take that much away from it, adding another $500,000 to wastewater treatment plant, I think really takes that 1.25 too low.
That's fine, we can leave, you know, more money in there and not switch it from replacing lost sector, public sector revenue to the water and sewer, but I would still like to see an increase of $150,000 for the 501c3s. Because I think I hate to be redundant, but I strongly feel there's going to be a significant amount of applications out there for this monies.
I got you, and I'll tell you this, Jen, and this is why this is April 14th, we're rolling it out. Patty and I, there's not really, kind of late for me to say this, I've already talked a lot, but we were involved in these meetings, so these are the numbers we think are right.
Right.
But we understand that the other 3 board members, we wanted to give some time, albeit it's not a lot of time, because it's 16 days, until Paul has to, in good faith, put in something on at least one of the 3 line items. And not for anything, we also, actually all 3 line items have to be figured out by April 30th, because if we do the grants, then it's not fair to the grant application people that want to do it, a 501c3, to drag it out. Because as you said, Councilman Cahill, they all need money now. There's an urgency, this and that, so we owe it to them to get them out. This is the pool of money, here are the parameters, this and that. So we need to come up with this, I really believe, in the next 16 days. This was the rollout. Patty and I were involved in this, so I don't have to go on and on about why, we had these numbers, although I would certainly talk till the cows come home about why we came up with these numbers and rehashed about 4.5 hours of meetings over the last 2 months. It's important to hear Councilman Cahill's thoughts at first blush on this. It's important to hear Councilwoman Wynn's thoughts on this, and it's going to be important to hear Councilman Abbott's thoughts. When we sent this packet out yesterday, I knew Councilman Abbott is on vacation. I said, Bill, I really want you to look at that. I hope you get a chance to watch at least a portion of the workshop that is about this. We need your input on this. I know you're on vacation, but he's a long-standing board member, and let's face it, Councilman Abbott's got a lot of wisdom. So I do want to hear what he has to say. I want to hear what John Cahill has to say. I've heard it. I want to hear what Ginny Wynn has to say about this. And I realize, Ginny, it's at first blush.
Well, I understand, but I was, appreciate it in the future if we could, together as a board, as a team, go over this together and look at this first before we have a presentation like this.
And Ginny, I will tell you this, all right? I want to be very honest with you, and I know that you're learning the newness to the board. That would be, I don't think we can have an executive session about this.
I don't see where it comes under.
No.
Right. So the board members getting together as 5 public meeting laws, that can't happen. That's why a lot of what we do is 2 of the board members going out and taking care of something because they're not a quorum. That's why Councilman Cahill and Deputy Supervisor Cataldi have been assigned with Town Attorney Genesi to work with the NEQUAL's leadership to come up with the amended contract. I've never sat in on one of those meetings, and the reason why I don't sit in those meetings, then there'd be 3 town board members. That's a quorum. That would have to be a public meeting. So, and Ginny, I realize but that's why we can't come to this and do it.
I don't know that Ginny is necessarily saying, she wants to meet, executive session. I think the point that she's trying to make is we've had these funds since July of '21, and we're only now deciding or proposing how we're going to.
Can I ask something, Ginny? I don't want you speaking for Ginny.
Right.
I know you said we had the funds since July of '21. Is that what you meant, Ginny? Is it somewhere between July of '21 and now, like John is assuming that's what you meant? Or did you think that the 5 of us could get together and work on this together? Which would be a normal thing to think of. It's what I thought of when I became the supervisor. Why can't the 5 board members get together over coffee? And I got slapped upside the head. You can't do that.
Well, that's what was my idea too, because this way we don't just come in today and look at this. And Paul is a great presentation. Thank you so much. You always, great present and give us all the details and everything. But this is something that we need to take time. And again, I'm really signed for the museum and the library, and with the COVID and everything, they really need help too, with the grants. And I just have a meeting with the museum yesterday. Their roof is like coming down. They scrambled to try to find the money to fix it. And I feel really bad. And then the library the same way because of COVID, they don't have, enough funds to go there, not to do more things for the kids and for the events that they want to do. So, we all want to represent our, constituents and everything else. But I felt that we need to have more open, like you said, transparency is good and things like that. But we need to have the same time, you and Patty and Paul know this. Maybe you just call me in and say, hey, Ginny, we have this fund. And Patty was, because you say 3, we can only do 3. 5 is the form. Then you can't do that. You have to be public. And that's just for 2
You
of
can't
us.
do 3. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure, as we talk into the microphones and some of us, we can't do 3.
Okay, then you just call one of us in and say, this is what we have, and just you, me, and Paul, and then, and then do that. So you say, these are important. We need to get this. Do you understand? Like I say, I'm learning.
Sure.
You guys all terrific and helping me out a lot, but something like this is very important.
Sure.
I just want to add that even though we've had 3 meetings about this, to the point of we've had it since last July, the requirements, the restrictions, the reporting, and all of that changed since it first came out.
Just recently.
Just recently, every time.
Final rule was effective April first.
Right, the first time we looked at it, it was one thing, and the second time we looked at it, it was another, so that required yet another meeting.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all set in stone of how we had, what the process was. Secondly, as far as discussion and transparency and all talking about it, that's what we're doing right now. And even though we met previously, we can't dictate what this is going to be, and that's why we're looking for more comments and in full transparency, doing it at a workshop so that everyone can hear what we're talking about. It's unfortunate that Councilman Abbott is not here to add what he thinks. I really would like to hear from him in some correspondence and his thoughts on this, because this probably will move forward before he returns.
Yeah.
Right, and
So
there,
I think that.
I'm sorry, go
Can I
ahead.
finish? Thank you.
Yes, I apologize.
So we're presenting it tonight in a workshop, and I think this is something, we have one more workshop on this?
We could, I mean, certainly we can come back on the 28th and talk about it. I don't think there is a resolution aspect to this, Paul.
I got to file by the 30th, just keep that in mind.
No, I understand.
Compliance.
I think filing by the 30th, the only thing that's going to change is just plugging in the number.
Yeah, I can make this easy. I mean, the only number we have to identify is a standard allowance. The
Well,
other two numbers, you have complete flexibility.
We don't.
right?
And Paul, the reason why we don't, I mean, here's how we, if we said, this is the easiest play.
Right.
2 million for the standard allowance, 2 million for the sewer plant, no grants. What happens then, post April 30th, is that Art and his crew figure out and talk to us about where you use the 2 million for the sewer. Is it on the $31 million phase 2? Is it on what you're about to present to us, Paul, today, the Vosburg station? Is it on other collections? Then the other 2 million, which is the standard whatever, as Jenny just said, you want to advocate for the library, you want to advocate for the museum. All of those things probably fall into that $2 million
Which we
standard.
can decide later.
Your presentation gives some ideas,
Right.
bullet points of what could fall under the $2 million standard. That, like, we don't have to obligate the money to specific things in that until the end of '24. That's how much time we'd have to work on it, all right? And we'd have a lot of time. The problem is that because on April 30th, they're telling you, when the final rule came out on April 1st, you need to lay out the standard deduction, right?
Yep, that's the one part I have to fill in.
Because, and no good deed goes unpunished, I guess, we decided through these meetings that we should put out some to outside of town government, the grant thing.
Well,
We've created our own confusion or whatever. We could make this very simple, scrap the grant program, split it 2 million to the sewer, 2 million to the general stuff, and we go on our way in May and have great communication thereafter about, you know, with Art and his crew about what to do with the sewer stuff, and then with the rest of the board and all the other departments about what to do with the other 2 million for standard deduction.
I just want to make something a little clear. We didn't decide that money would be put to grants, we're just suggesting. When we looked at this in the beginning, we didn't decide that, it's just a
And thank you,
suggestion to
Patty.
the rest of the group.
Go through the 17 pages, proposed,
Right.
proposed.
But I
It's proposed everywhere,
Yes.
all right? Because of the U.S. Department, and we're going to move on from this, because we don't have Bill here, but we're going to get Bill's feedback. We come back here on April 21st at a regular board meeting. Bill's still not going to be here. It's not a workshop thing, but maybe we can get some more input and insights from John and from Councilwoman Wynn. Maybe you and I have got some new ideas about this. Obviously, by April 28th, I think we have to get this locked down, because you have to make the submission.
And we can still discuss at the 21st meeting. If it's not a resolution, it's not a resolution.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think Bill is going to be here for that. Like I said before, we'll move up. I had reached out to Bill yesterday via email just saying, hey, read this 17 pages, this presentation. If you get a chance, you can watch live on Facebook. I hope he's not. I hope he's having fun someplace. But go and watch the tape so we can get a flavor for what Councilwoman Wynn said, what Councilman Gale said, all that, and Bill's own input on this. Maybe Bill says, I think John is dead nuts right. We need to go to 3 million on the sewer, we need to go to 500,000 on the grants, and we take the standard deduction down to 550.
I know we have to move on, and I appreciate everybody's input. And my last comment will be that, I would be very disappointed if the grants aspect of these funds was removed. And I will advocate heavily that they remain in. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome, Tom.
Hey, speaking of Paul, I said you'd start well before 6.
Not bad.
Starting after 6, huh?
I'll take it.
Good night, everybody.
No. Our second item tonight, and last item tonight, is a presentation by Paul Chatfield of MRB Group on the Bosberg Pump Station Preliminary Engineering Report. And the time to Art and Paul.
Yep, so we're going to talk about Bosberg Pump Station, and thank you for giving us the time. For many years, prior to me, and I know I've been talking about it in my time here, the deficiencies at our Bosberg Pump Station. Bosberg Pump Station is our largest pump station, both physically and by flow, heads and tails of anything else that we have. It is, I know, Paul, you're going to touch on some of this, it's well over 40 years old. We're in dire straits with that station. Paul's going to touch on that. I know, Patty, you've been there with us during last year's rains, where we had 8 to 10 feet of raw sewage within the building because we have deficiencies. So early in 2021, I made a presentation to the board to obtain a engineer review on the station. We sent out a quality-based RFP. MRB, Paul Chatfield, and his team were chosen. So in August of 21, for the last 9 months, his team has been working with myself and my team to create a rather comprehensive evaluation of the station. And I now will turn it over to Paul Chatfield to summarize what's in these 300 some odd pages that you put together for us.
All right, I didn't get paid by the page. All right. Okay. Well, thank you for having me here tonight to talk about the pump station at Vosburg. I was thinking on my ride here, how could I make it exciting to talk about pump stations and treatment plants? I've done this for 40 years, and I still haven't come up with a way to make it exciting. So I'll do my best. This is the Vosburg Pump Station, 601 Vosburg Road. This pump station provides sewage pumping through 2 forced mains that discharge over by Whiting Road. And that pump station provides sewer service to kind of the northwest portion of Webster and a portion of Penfield. And I will tell you from the investigations, and I've been out there numerous times working with Art and the sewer department, the job that they do is really remarkable. To have such good staff all across the board. This pump station is in need of repairs, not because of the staff that you have working on it. It's 42 years old, and a 42-year-old pump station would be like having a 15-year-old car. You can keep it going. It's rusting out, you know, you might have to replace the brakes, and sooner or later you have to replace the motor. The pump station is the same thing. It has a useful life. It's well in excess of its useful life. I guess that's the first thing that I want to share. Two things that we found relating to the system. First is the age of the system, and then the second thing is the significant component failures within the system. The pumps, the valves, the controls, many other things. But the operation and maintenance problems have plagued the station, and nobody likes to have to pay for sewage, but they sure don't want to have it backing up into their houses. And you know, this is a problem that we got to make sure that we take care of. The capital improvement plan provides a comprehensive evaluation of the needs of the system, kept coming up with a plan of attack, a long-range plan of attack. One of the problems is that the existing pump station has no working flow meter. So as part of our investigation, we did 8 weeks of flow monitoring. Fortunate enough, we were able to pick up normal storms or normal daily events. Plus, we were also to pick up several storm events. Minimum flow in the middle of the night, a little over 330 gallons a minute. Normal daily flow, a little bit under 600 gallons a minute. That's your typical average across the board flow. The maximum average flow typically occurring at times when people are starting to use the bathrooms and the water usage at home. Early in the morning, later in the afternoon and the evening, that was just a little bit under 1,000 gallons a minute. The pump station is designed for 2,310 gallons per minute. There are 3 pumps in the pump station. But we've had wet weather events that have gone well above 1,000 gallons a minute, and in some cases above 2,000, and in some cases above the actual capacity of the pump station, 3,000 gallons per minute and above. One of those events occurred, I think it was the 26th of October, and I think Patty, you had been out there.
I was there.
Yep. Just for reference, I looked at that pump station earlier in the day. I went out and visited the station early in the day, about 11 o'clock in the morning. It was after it had rained early in the morning. The pumps were keeping up with it at 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock at night, a whole different story.
There was pretty tense moments when it seemed as though it was taking care of it, and then it would kick off, and then it would start rising again, and how far is it going to rise? And our
You're
crews
right.
worked really hard on that all night.
And it was due to the antiquated controls we have.
Yep. So some of the concerns, certainly the useful life has been exceeded, but more importantly, one pump is unable to be serviced because the valves on the suction and discharge side of the pumps are deteriorated to the point where they're not able to keep the pump station closed, to be able to go in and operate. One pump is down entirely right now. That's a significant problem. So we're now, depending upon 2 of the 3 pumps within the system. I'm just going to show you some pictures. This is a couple of pictures. The south pump, which is out of service due to valve failure. This just shows the deterioration. Yes.
Are those, at that pump station, are all 3 pumps designed to be running at the same time, or is one generally for backup?
Yeah, go ahead.
So normally, the pump station with 3 pumps, lead, lag, and standby. Right now, and actually, it's been for quite a while, we have a lead and lag.
Okay.
We do not have a standby. During high flows, you'll have 2 pumps kick on, and if needed, 3. Obviously, if you're getting to 3, we're in trouble. If you're getting to 2, quite honestly, in my opinion, you've got some high flows.
Right.
So,
Clearly, we need to have everyone running.
Yes.
This is a pretty
oh,
significant problem.
absolutely,
It's crucial.
yeah,
crucial.
absolutely.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
It's great.
This is just a picture of the raw sewage leaking on the floor in the pump station as a result of the damage to the pump and the seals. As I said, we're unable to isolate the pump for repairs. This picture, I don't know if you can see it there, but you can actually see the sewage and the water leaking down from the seal. I'm going to skip through this pretty quick. I've got a bunch of pictures I want to show you.
If you can go back a slide.
Sure.
So, in the event that we need to turn that pump on, there's no seals in it. So what the staff is left with and is turning the pump on in raw sewage spraying throughout the roof. That's the environment they're working in. And that's the environment that they tried to repair this thing and just couldn't get it and finally had to give up.
Other problems besides the pumps and the controls, the ventilation system within the wet well, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that. It's a corrosive atmosphere. Wastewater, as it comes into the wet well, and when it goes into manholes, the separation of the wastewater from the hydrogen sulfide creates that corrosive atmosphere, and the ventilation system in the wet well is inappropriate and inoperable. And top of that, the wet well capacity is very small. I'll show you the picture of that. The emergency bypass pumping system that is in place was designed and put into place in 1980 and does not sufficiently provide capacity in the event of a high flow condition where we have 2,300 gallons a minute operating or above that. So that system is in need of significant improvement. Big problem, force main discharges into a manhole with a significant amount of deterioration from the hydrogen sulfide. The only way to repair that is to just eliminate it and replace it. I'll show you the pictures of that. And then some air release valves in the system that are inoperable, and some of them are rotted off. Here's some pictures of the wet well. And so the wastewater flow comes in at the top of the page, comes in, goes through the wet well, and the wet well is kind of the tank that provides a little bit of buffer so that the flow comes in and then it gets distributed to the 3 pumps. And in that, it's a very small well. It has a capacity of about 9,000 gallons, which is about 10 minutes at the very most of capacity, not very much capacity at all. This is a picture of the ventilation system that, if we could really zoom in on that, shows some very deteriorated and rotted ductwork and equipment.
Paul, you can stay there for a
Yeah.
second. So if you notice the yellow overhead crane, the yellow crane, the crane is rotted to the point it is inoperable. When our folks, our staff, has to, there's a grinder down below and a mixer, which we pull on a regular basis.
Can you point to the crane? I can't really
Yep.
see it.
Yep, it's right there. Okay.
Right, so they have to actually get ladders out over by the door, hook up a chain fall up on the 10-foot ladder, hook a chain fall, try to get this equipment out, and then tear it all down. It's not the safest working environment.
I don't say that.
And that's done on a regular basis.
That's just unsafe.
Yeah. So here's a
And also
picture of
the blocks on that wall seem to be separated too.
You
Yeah.
saw that on the left?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah.
That's not good.
So we put an allowance in the budget for improvements to the structure of the wet well itself. Picture of a couple of the pumps. So there's 3 pumps. We just didn't get a picture of all 3 of them, but they're centrifugal pumps with a motor on top of it. And the next picture will show the valves. So this is a typical valve, and this is the pipe coming in from the wet well. The wet well is over here. Sewage comes in. This valve is a gate valve that normally is open. If you're gonna operate and do a repair to the pump, you would close this valve, and this is the type of valve that is inoperable in the south pump. This happens, so the flow comes in, goes through the pumps right here, and then comes out, and there's a check valve. And the problem with check valves is they get rags, get caught up in there, and they don't close properly, and they don't operate properly. So you've got to get in there periodically. You see on top of the check valve is a flange that gets taken off when they shut down the suction and discharge side, take off that top, clean it, and repair it, get it back in service. And we're just unable to really be able to do that on a routine, regular basis.
Paul, you can stay there for a second. So if you look at the check valves and see the staining, all the check valves are leaking. When I first started, we looked at rebuilding the check valves. The check valves are obsolete. We've not been making rebuild kits for them. So, like Paul said, the inability to isolate the check valve, even no way of cleaning any rags out. And also, Paul, if you can point to the stain below the suction line on the wall. Yeah. So there's a stain underneath each and every one of these 3 suction lines. That is the wet well leaking through. At one point, we had the wall injected to try to stop the seepage. The pipes are deteriorating. I'm sure Paul will talk about that. But that's leaking through that wall.
Yeah, so as part of the overall plan to rebuild the station would be take all that piping out, take the pumps out, replace them, but also on the suction side, that's an 8-inch diameter pipe, and what we, based upon our evaluation, have determined that it should really be a 12-inch pipe. And so the nice thing about putting a 12-inch pipe in there is then we can go in and do that repair so that we can cut out and core out a 12-inch pipe and put a new 12-inch pipe in there with a link seal and take away that problem that are identified with the leak. So it's a kind of a catch-22. You do it and you've solved really 2 problems. Okay. Generator, the life has been exceeded. The key with that is, as I mentioned, the wet well capacity is about 10 minutes. So in the event of a long extended power failure, we've got to be able to get that pump station back up and running right away. It's 42 years old. The normal life, in that 15 to 19 year time frame from what we understand from the industry. The controls are antiquated. Many of them are 42 years old. Technology has changed so much over the years that this is a case of needing improved efficiency, and equipment is available because there's parts that are kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul.
So if you can, on the right-hand control, right there, so you can see there's a sheet of paper up there with masking tape. Those are notes my guys have to leave to what not to turn on, what to leave on, so the station runs. With new controls, as we're going to look at for all stations, we integrate basically a cloud system, so we can see at the plant what's going on. What's going on if we have a fault or anything like that. Right now, we have an individual that visits each station every day to check, and we will continue to do that. But to have real-time data on what the pumps are doing, what the flows are doing, it's just invaluable.
Here's probably one of the biggest concerns that I noticed when I walked in and took a look at it, and this is from close to the original construction. These were chemical lines that were welded into the 16-inch ductile iron force main. Now the key concern with that is that's the force main. The flow of sewage is going from the pumps out of the station at 100 psi or something like that. If the welds on that green lines break, and sooner or later they will, that means that raw sewage is going to be shooting out of that out of that line that gets broken, and it's really just a matter of time before that becomes a catastrophic problem. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here, but that is one area, big area of concern.
Well, and then to your point, Paul, so those are what we're estimating, the thickness of those pipes have rotted close to 40–50%. 2 years ago, I had the guys go out and clean them and start spraying them every month with galvanized spray to try to slow it down. And we did that for 4 to 5 months to try to maintain it, as Paul said. When they fail, there's no stopping.
Yep. So here's a picture of the air release valves. So there's 2 air release valves, one on Vosburg Road and one on Van Alstyne at Shoemaker. Is that right? Right at the intersection. And this happens to be one that is got the air release valve installed still. We're not quite sure if it works or not. We don't think so. But you can see that the force main right next to it has a saddle with a cap on it. And that one has been broken off and a cap was installed. So both air release stations are in significant need of improvement. And they were put in for a reason, and they need to be put back into service and operation. So as part of the improvements, we would recommend making improvements to that. Here's the picture of the discharge manhole. You can see, if you look around the kind of the perimeter of it, you can see this is 2 force mains that discharge into this manhole. You can see the flow is coming through the northern force main, and what's happening is it's dropping down and it's swirling, and all the hydrogen sulfide is coming up and causing the corrosion and contamination and problem to the manhole.
Well, can you tell us what a force main is?
Oh, sure. Yep. So the force main is, so we have the pump station, and then there's a pipe that discharges the wastewater flow, and it's called a force main, and they call it a force main because it's under force or under pressure. So it's going, from the pump station, it's down low, and then it pumps up to the top of Vosburg Road, and it's pumping up in elevation until it gets to a point where it can then flow by gravity.
And there are no tie-ins to force mains or anything like that. I know that's been discussed, and not to get off track or take us down a rabbit hole, but some people talk about, well, there's a main in front of our house. Well, if it's a force main, there's no tapping into it. It is a dedicated line to the discharge manhole. This specific pump station has 2 force mains through the volume.
So my recommendations, based upon our extensive investigation, is that a comprehensive rehab of the facility is necessary. We believe that bypassing the entire pump station during construction will lead to the shortest construction time and will be the most cost effective. As part of that, the station would be bypassed. There'd be some improvements that were necessary to accommodate the flow for normal flows and also for that wet weather flow on the bypass system. That's part of the improvements. Improvements to the structure of the wet well and the ventilation system, as I've shown. Replacement of the 3 pumps, piping, valves, etc. inside the station. We recommend switching to a dry pit submersible pump station configuration, which is the sewer department is familiar with it. We feel it's more reliable. The nice thing about taking the station down all at one time is that you've got a clean slate to work with inside that station there to reconfigure the pumps and reconfigure the valves and the piping in a manner that's best suited for the pump station. A new flow meter, put a flow meter in there to know what the flow in the system is. Replace the antiquated controls, replace the generator, install the bypass piping, as I mentioned, as part of that temporary bypass, which will become a permanent bypass in the future. Improvements to the air release valves, 2 locations, replacement of that force main discharge manhole, and improved security measures at the pump station itself. So, this project will require multiple prime contracts because of Wick's law. Prevailing wage rates are required. So we came up with a estimated cost of $2.338 million for construction. We put a couple of contingencies in there, importantly because of the economy, the way that bidding is and the supply chain problems are. We've put a 15% contingency, plus we put a 10% material cost adjustment. We feel it's prudent for the board to consider both of those contingencies in establishing the budget. And then we've lumped together the legal, administration, and engineering services at, estimated at 25%. So the total project cost, $3,508,000, is the cost that we anticipate if we were to proceed ahead with design of the project later this summer and bid it in the fall and start construction in 2023. The cost of delaying, who knows what the inflation rate's going to be, but I used a conservative 6% inflation rate. I think CPI is going to be around 7% possibly this year. So, by putting the project off, 4 years, a $3.5 million project would go to $4.4 million, probably at a minimum. I'd like to, project schedule. So project schedule, we think anywhere from 21 months to 32-month time frame. We know that the board needs some time to digest this and work with the other Paul, with the money, and money Paul, and then start the process. 6 to 9 months for the design and the permits and approvals, a couple extra months for that. Typically on these projects, the shortest time period is the construction itself. And, we think that, we can have the station shut down for 4 months, but total construction probably in the 6 to 9 month time frame. So there's some risks with waiting. Potential for catastrophic failure, as we've talked about. Currently operating the station without full capacity. The chemical feed line, as I've shown, will flood the station with no ability to stop a leak. There's increased operational costs without doing anything. We can replace a pump or a motor if we could get in there and shut it down, but ultimately it's not in the long-term best interest of the town and the sewer department to do a Band-Aid approach to it. Increased future capital costs associated with waiting on the project. The corrosive atmosphere, is an unsafe working environment, and all components are well beyond their useful life. Certainly, these improvements are not considered optional, they're really inevitable and necessary. Okay, I'd like to open it up to questions or maybe final comments from Art.
Yeah, I actually got a question. So, Paul, once this project is all done, what is the lifespan of that pump station?
Well, I think you would be able to get another 40 years out of it. I think you would be able to. I mean, we're going to be making some structural improvements that need to be made to it. And I would full expect that the pump station itself would. I think there are times that a treatment plant itself would not. Now, within that 40 years, you're going to have to be replacing some pumps and some motors and things of that nature. But the structure itself and the system itself, 40 years. But certainly short-lived assets, things that need to be replaced periodically.
Yeah, Paul, you mentioned, if we wait, might have to replace a pump or a motor. Bear in mind, we don't have the ability to replace a pump. The south pump we cannot touch at all. Either the north or middle pump fail. We're down to one pump. station cannot run on one pump. So it's,
No, it's a pretty comprehensive presentation, I appreciate it. The 10% material cost adjustment, I know where I work, we're seeing a 20% increase. And do you think that number should be a little higher than 10%?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some materials that have gone up 5%, and I've seen some materials that have gone up 50%. It really, and some materials you can't get, or the delay on it is so long, so.
Well, I agree 100% with your assessment regarding kinetic weighting. I think the pictures tell a pretty drastic story here, and it's too bad that we have had to wait this long to get one pump that's inoperable, and we're just setting ourselves up for a catastrophic event. Yeah, I think we really need to seriously consider doing this sooner than later. Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
This pump station actually has smaller pump stations feeding into it, correct?
Correct.
It's like a booster pump station.
Correct. There's a couple of stations at Discharge.
so yeah, there's a good portion of town in Penfield.
It's a big,
Well, it was put in place when in 1980, and
1980.
we've seen significant growth in Webster since 1980.
And Penfield.
And great point, Charlie.
Yeah, and Paul, I think that you toured, Money Paul, I think you toured this with us a while ago as well, didn't you? Did we go down and see this pump station?
yeah, I was with him.
Yeah, and that was
interesting.
when it
We
was
saw firsthand.
running okay, and it still was not a pretty sight.
No.
So that night in October gave me a real good indication of just how subject to failure this pump station is. I just want to say that this is my third meeting this week on all things sewer. Yesterday's was a review of belt presses where we were watching sludge moving through there. I am the liaison to sewer, lucky me, but it's certainly been a great learning experience, and this presentation, we had me in love.
Follow that up. Jenny?
Well, like I said, we should, try to get this project as soon as possible before, get worse. Shouldn't do anything else.
The other thing that concerns me a great deal is that we're putting our employees in an environment that is completely unsafe, and we should not be doing that.
So, can I do my best impersonation of my friend, Councilman Abbott, and his extension? I hope it makes him proud when I do the rest. So, Art,
Absolutely.
let's talk about how we're going to pay this. Paul?
I don't go anywhere without Paul.
That's good. And
I'm not a
So
finance
let me lay the question down. I mean, and everything everybody said, and I mean, the thing is, Paul Chapman, I love the 15-year-old car example. That really resonates. Like, what are we doing here? So, here we are. Another $3 million plus project. The hits just keep coming, right? But we're getting pretty good the last couple of years of figuring out ways to apply for grants. The first thing today, we went from $2.5 million to maybe $3 million in the ARPA money. So there's a lot of different ways to pay that $3.5 million. Have you guys thought about that, Art? Have you talked to Paul? Paul Adams?
I have not. So Paul Chatfield and I have just finished this up in the last week or so, as far as the whole presentation and so forth. We've not talked to Paul Adams to this point.
I'm wondering if there are available grants for energy efficiencies on something like this.
Possibly.
And would be new pumps, would be, my grant to grab something out of it.
Might get a little bit.
Yeah. I know, Patty, you had sent over something with FEMA.
such a project developed eligible for a WIA grant, or is that only the treatment plants?
I think it's only available for treatment plants.
I had to research that. I was almost gonna think that it would be.
Okay.
But at any rate, whatever you decide as far as grants go, you know, the WIA grants, I don't think have been announced at this point. We're in the process of working in our office. We have grant writers, you know, working on the project, so that's something that they could look at, you know. But I would say, if you're gonna, first thing, try and get your arms around figuring out how you're gonna either, you know, finance it or how you're gonna approach the grants. But because that design process and the approval process will take 9 months to 12 months, my opinion would be proceed with the design of the improvements, knowing that one way or another you're gonna get the funds. Either you're gonna get it through grants or you're gonna figure out how to make it happen from your standpoint. That way, that you're progressing ahead. And the other thing is it's showing somewhat of a goodwill that you have skin in the game, that you are starting the process of design so that you can be ready to go, and I don't know if you would call that a shovel ready, but that's getting pretty close to being a shovel ready. If you have plans put together and you have permits and approvals and you're ready to go.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right, Paul. We run into this, we did the same process with our phase 1 at the treatment plant, and also with our current project. We needed to be shovel ready. We believe that we have grants were going to be announced literally any day. I got an email today. We're still waiting. I mean, they're a few months behind, but we're hoping to get those. Would you be able to talk to your grant team to see if something like this would be available for a big grant? Sure. Or any other funding?
Sure.
Hard to believe that pump station will last another 2 years.
I think
do a good job as council. He's gonna give me probably a C.
Well, that's all you did.
You think you'd give me a D?
you just asked the councilman to have your questions been answered.
Yeah, mine had been. So the design phase, what steps does the board need to take to move in that direction?
We would need to get a proposal from MRB for design fees and scope, look for them on scope. And then over at that point, it really would follow the same as we've done with the plan and so forth.
So Charlie, do we need a resolution to move ahead with having put the scope of the design together?
No.
No.
No. No. That's something that we could work on. Yeah.
Well, I would, not to speak for anyone other than myself, but I'm certainly in favor of moving forward in that direction.
And I think, not speaking for the board, but that would be the logical next step to work on a scope, obtain a cost for design, and then bring it back. Yeah, exactly, for further discussion.
And it's also, from what I've seen in history, it's also good to start doing those scopes with this information that's fresh and pertinent, as opposed to, well, we really can't do it this year, let's kick it down the road, and then all of a sudden, we need to do all this study work again.
Right.
So I think we've got a good basis for what we need to start with.
Great one.
Yeah, I'll work with Art in developing the scope and putting a draft proposal together and then present it to the board for approval.
And I don't know who had mentioned this, you supervisor had mentioned it, okay, we got another conversation. I will say, due to the help of our budget, fall, we've been able to, a lot of our smaller pump stations, we've absorbed those upgrades and modernizations into our budget. This year we have Shoecraft pump station, which will receive new pumps, new control panel. Actually, the guys started working on some of that this week. Our HAPA pump station, which is right outside of a senior living facility, a very problem pump station. We spent a lot of time there cleaning bags and diapers and things of the sort. We were pumps for $10,000. We have the ability in-house to go ahead and change those. So that's going to happen this year. You know, again, we've changed pumps and upgraded pumps throughout the town, and we'll continue to do that. We're finding problem areas, older pumps, creating efficiencies, reducing overtime, and reducing call-outs. It's allowing us the time to go ahead and do the maintenance that's been really deferred for many, many years. And to your point, Paul, that staff in years past was so adept at really just keeping things running. And that's what you're seeing there. And we're seeing it all over town, is keeping things running. We're very good at it, the plant, keeping things running. But once you start peeling back the onion, it's like, this stuff is 20, 30 years old. We're throwing good money after bad at it. And just in parts, and let alone the paper at the time. So it's a great staff. They work hard, they know what they're doing, but they're seeing the value of, okay, we need that upgrade. It's not as hard on them, it's not as hard on the system.
Oh, I've said it before, Mark, I'm going to say it again, we're very fortunate to have you bring these issues to the forefront, because as we saw tonight, a lot of these things should have been addressed years ago, and I'm just thankful that you're here to educate us.
Well,
Thank you for your presentation, Paul.
Thank you, John, but I think it's really, the thanks goes to the leadership of the town to be open to listening to these presentations. That's really where it comes from. Giving us the ability to, to trust in the department heads and say, okay, yes, go ahead and work with MRP to get that PER, and bring us back in 9 months later to listen to the findings.
Thank you.
There's nothing fun about wastewater treatment and wastewater conveyance, but it's necessary. It's not a park, it's not a nice community building or something like that, but we all want and expect flush our toilets and have them work. And turn the water on, have the water work. Those are our expectations. So it's the people behind the scenes that make it happen. It's the operators and the staff and all that stuff. So hats off to the board for taking 50 minutes to listen to me ramble on about pumps and pump stations.
Well, I appreciate your very thorough study. Thank you.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
And to that point, none of it happens without a lot of Paul's guidance. All that. Money ball.
Moneyball. That's great, Charlie. I never thought about that before. All right, Billy Bean of Webster. Well, thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Yep. And I disagree with you. I think sewer is fun.
Good.
That's another story. And I don't, unless there's anything else, I think that concludes tonight's town board workshop. And everybody have a great weekend. Happy Easter. And we'll be back at it next week.
Paul, you do that, or we still on?
Thanks so much over there.
Paul, Tom, I do one more thing, I know we're off, but our outlet pump station that has been 100% approved by DEC, Kim and Dolly at the agenda, as to when it will go out through the town board and transportation. So that was that's a bit of a tool.
Great. All right.
Good job, everybody.
Dolly, I think, did I have? Oh, very good. Charlie, Jenny.
Have a good, thank you. You're gonna help your grandkids?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do one right.
Yeah, they're.
I couldn't believe
I can't build.
what I did was, yeah, I told them.
10, 12,
That's what I did.
Yeah. I miss those young kids.
Paul?
Good night.
Good presentation.